You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, it's me again, Mighty Blue, and you are listening to episode number 418 of the podcast, Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I'm on quite a bit of a time crunch as I prepare for my upcoming hikes, both back on the AT next week and, of course, my 630-mile hike of the Southwest Coast Path in the UK next month. In fact, I'm trying to put this together today as well as next week's episode, when I won't be here. In fact, on Thursday next week, my itinerary is taking our little group from Lambert's Meadow Shelter to Catawba Shelter, taking in the glorious Maccabee Knob sometime late afternoon. I can't tell you, I am so excited to be hitting the AT once more and really looking forward to meeting up with my friends again. Anyway, this week's show is a little different with 2 interviews as usual, but the second will be introducing something that I haven't fully announced yet, so please hang around for that. I referred to it briefly at the end of last week's show, but this week we have my friend Katie Becker filling you all in on our Hike with Steve initiative. By the way, thanks to those of you who've reached out to me already on this subject. I hope you all realise by the end of today's show how close this mission is to my heart. But our main guest today is somebody who you've been listening to for the past year and a half with my reading of George Steffanos' book, Then the Hail Came. I eventually got in touch with George and we arranged a recording a few weeks back. You know, it was funny to be talking with this guy who was just a few years younger than me, yet I've only previously known him as a bloke in his mid-20s. It was quite a shock to me to have these two kind of diverse people in my mind. Anyway, let's meet him. Here is George Steffanos. Our guest today is almost certainly actually one of the more requested guests for the show. For those of you who listen to my readings at the end of the podcast, well, you've been listening to his AT hike from 40 years ago. And you've been listening for about the last 20 months. This is George Steffanos. Hey, George, how are you?
How you doing, Steve?
I'm good, and it's lovely to, I was going to say put a face to the name, but our cameras aren't working, so I can't actually put a face to the name, but nice to put a voice to the name. And, well, I've got to say, by the way, I did some working out today. You were an extremely difficult bloke to contact when I first reached out to you, because I checked back today, all my emails and so on. A listener suggested that I interview you in November 2019. I first emailed you a month later, January 2020. Then, of course, the world went crazy with COVID and so on. But then I heard nothing for over 2 years. As it turned out, as you told me, you didn't check the email I sent it to that often. And then you found it and you agreed for me to get reading. And I read the first chapter, or part of the first chapter, on May the 12th, 2022. And I've been reading it ever since. And I'm telling everybody that because I wanted to then thank you for allowing me the privilege of reading about your journey. I absolutely loved it.
Well, thank you very much for the very kind words. And actually, that time that you first contacted me was the tail end of a long period where I had health problems and was like a lot of days I would just not even try to answer a lot of emails because my mind was so unfocused during that stretch.
Right.
And then after between the time you contacted me and I contacted you, I actually got health insurance because things actually got so bad for me. I was able to get health insurance, which is the weird way things like that happen in America. And once I started feeling better, which was fairly quickly, once I started addressing my problems, I started going back through my emails and trying to answer a lot of the people that I never answered. And you were one of them. I just sent an email one day, and it was a long time after you sent it to me. And I said, sorry, I didn't answer you if you still want to talk to me.
Of course I did. It's one that people had put me onto, and I'd read the blog because it was just on a website at the time. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, I know that you hiked the trail in a very different era to actually most of us, I guess, but you didn't seem to stick with a trail name at all. You didn't seem to get a trail name. Was there a trail name culture back there at the time?
Yeah, most everybody I hiked with that, or hiked, had a trail name. For some reason, I never thought, I don't know. I thought about it, but I never came up with a name I liked. And I guess a lot of people get their trail names from other hikers. And at the time, in 1983, when I hiked, and I started May 3rd, which was a lot later, which is like not even a lot, 2 weeks later than the majority of the people.
Sure.
That the big early rush ended 2 weeks before I started hiking, so I didn't meet a lot of through hikers, especially early on, and nobody ever gave me a name.
Right. But you met a lot of people along the way, and you introduced those characters through your blog, and your blog is so incredibly detailed. Was it always the intention to record literally everything, or did you have to take notes along the way and write them up later? Because there were no cell phones at that time, or even Palm Pilots, if anybody remembers those. How did you actually do it? Was it just literally a book and a pencil?
Yeah, a pen and a notebook, and a lot of times a candle, because I was writing it at night and it's out there. And we used candles back then.
Oh my God. Isn't that funny, actually? It makes you sound like the 1800s, but yeah, it's not really not that long ago when you couldn't put your torchlight on in your tent, could you? With on your phone, because you just didn't have one of those in those days. Yeah. That was quite a commitment, though, to be writing by candlelight at night. Was it because you wanted to record for everybody else, and did you feel a responsibility with the blog?
Well, my brother and I, our parents had some issues, and the way it turned out was that my mother's mother, my grandmother, was the only true parent we ever had.
Right.
And she was also cooler than any of my parents. So.
Apparently.
Yeah. The one story that kind of sums her up was there was a minor league hockey league called the Eastern League back then, and it was the basis for a famous Paul Newman movie, Slapshot, where he plays for this really dirty team.
All right, yeah.
And that was the entire Eastern Hockey League. I was looking back at the stats of a couple of years ago, and there'd be 200 minutes of penalties every game. That was like an average game. And my grandmother loved the local team, which we grew up just north of New Haven, Connecticut. And she loved the New Haven Blades, which was the Eastern League hockey team. And my little hunchbacked, tiny Italian grandmother used to go to those games, and she loved the fights. And she also swore like a sailor.
Nice.
So she'd be rooting for the players very profanely, especially, and excitedly, especially when they were fighting. And it was a real low hockey league, so there weren't huge crowds, especially for the day games. And all what players' wives fell in love with her and became friends with her, and they used to hang out with her. And when she started bringing me and my brother, we were like geeky little 6-year-olds or something, to the game. The players' wives would call us over, and they'd introduce me and my brother to all the players. And it was like, I was telling you on our initial phone call, it was like somebody meeting whoever your major league, whatever your sport is. It was like meeting your major league stars.
Of course, yeah.
Meeting all those. So.
Was she the reason you were blogging then?
Well, I wrote it was a standard thing to write a journal. Right. So, I wrote a pretty, one reason, the initial, especially in Georgia, the entries are a lot shorter than most of it, was just, yes. I was just writing a few things, and, and when I sent it home, everybody was asking me, I would mail them home from when I hit a town, I would mail the pages home. And the first time I did, and then talk to people after they received them, everybody's, why don't you write more about this and that? And I realized even back then, even though I was only like 10 days in, that the Appalachian Trail experience was so overwhelming that I couldn't. They're asking me about pretty interesting things that happened a week ago,
Sure.
and I couldn't remember them because
Sure.
there were just so many things. So it was partly for me and partly for them, and especially my grandmother, who was born in like 1909.
Right.
And I could see her if she was born when I was or now. I could see her as an Appalachian Trail hiker.
Uh-huh.
But young women who were born in 1909 didn't really do that.
Of course, yeah.
She told me that she felt like the first time I talked to her, she said she felt like she was hiking the trail with me from my descriptions. So that made me want to do better. And,
I bet.
And then I also found out from my mother later in the call that my grandmother had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Oh,
so it kind of gave me more of a reason to try to take her on the hike with me as best I could. So if anybody, I mean, some people don't like it, some people do like it. Anybody who likes all the description in my story, it was because of that.
That is awesome. And when you put all those notes together, and you said in our previous conversation that you've been rewriting it over the last couple of years as well, obviously using those notes. Did it take you back there?
Yeah, it was the first time that I actually, because I mean, there were like a lot of words. I mean, I know the story's a long story now, but when I was writing in the journal, there was like maybe 3 or 4 times as much stuff. I was doing my best to write down everything like my family asked me to. And it was a little too, like when I tried to make a book out of it, it was a little too much because I mean, when you write, not only was I writing stuff at night when I didn't want to be writing stuff, by candlelight, not
Sure.
only was it kind of hard to do it, and a lot of times I just wanted to go to bed. And a lot of times because of that, I'd wake up the next day and it'd be summer and you'd like to get started like pretty early and beat some of the heat. And,
Sure.
and that's a recurring theme in my book is that I wanted to get an early start and it'd be like 7:30, 8 o'clock. And I mean, in the summer, that just makes your life a lot harder, If you can get out like 5 or 6, the days you get out at 5 or 6, it's so much easier to do the miles that you're going to do when you do a bunch of them before it hits 90,
So, and it came across pretty early in the book that you were what we used to refer in the UK, and I guess they do over here as well. You were a bit of a party animal when you were younger. How did the trail fit your lifestyle at the time? Did you take to it straight away, or was it a bit of a hard adjustment?
Well, even before I hiked the trail, I was always like 2 people. Like I liked hiking and backpacking, although I didn't do as much of it as I would have liked to because I didn't have a lot of money. So I couldn't afford. We did. My brother and I would do 2 trips a year to Acadia National Park in Maine, and then another backpacking trip in the White Mountains, and that was all we could afford. Like 3 days, maybe 4 days, and that was all we could afford to do.
Right. So it wasn't actually in your blood though, was it then? So it's not as if you went out as a child, or was it then?
Do you remember the Sherlock Holmes stories where he would do cocaine because he was bored when he didn't have a case?
Yes, of course, yeah.
When I was backpacking or hiking, I was fine, but when I started hiking, when I hiked the trail, I was 24, so I was in my teens and 20s, and that was just. It was the 70s. We partied.
Everybody at that age parties. So I don't care what generation it is. And though your life hasn't gone smoothly since the trail, and I'm going to come to that a little later on. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and share a bit of a spoiler alert and tell people. I want you to tell people of your plans for next year.
I'm still getting everything together, but I would love to. And I mean, I'm doing my best. I'm more than half convinced I'm going to be able to do it. In 2025, I want to hike the trail again and do it with all the belt. Like one of the things that made my journal so hard to write back then was I wasn't able to look at the pictures I shot until months later, you know?
Yes, cool. Yes. You mentioned that a few times, actually. Yeah.
I was just thinking of how much time I could have saved that night trying to remember what happened to me during the day if I could scroll back through my pictures. And I mean, there's just so many things now, you know, you get writing on your phone instead of like scrolling with a pen and a I mean, there's so many ways that it's easier now. Yeah, record a few voice memos during the day, or maybe even jot down some. I mean, so I'm looking forward to doing a lot better job of covering things that I didn't cover in the book, especially since, you know, with like there was a period in Virginia where there was like 16 days or something where I didn't take one picture.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I plan to make up for that. And I could see why I didn't, because the pictures around it, yeah, it's like when I'd shoot a view, it looked like, you know, it looked like smog. It was so the humidity was, and the summer humidity in Southwest Virginia was pretty dense once you got out of the high country.
So you were 24 when you originally hiked the trail, and you're going to be 66 when you head out next year. A 42-year gap. We're going to come to why you did it in the first place, but why do you want to go again so long after that first go round? Is it because you want to see the changes, or is it you just want to do it what you think is an easier era to do it? Because you still have to walk 2,200 miles.
Yeah, well, the past couple of years, I've like scanned hundreds of my slides and put them in the digital photos, and then trying to make a few extra bucks for the trail and stuff. I've been on social media, a lot of social media, posting entries from my book and matching them up with the photos. And I mean, you just get, I mean, if you keep day after day looking at really looking at pictures of the White Mountains and the Rowan Highlands and some of those places, you're going to remember, like, you think you remember how nice it is now, but if you spend a few days staring at the pictures, you're going to realize that you didn't even remember how nice it was. You just thought you did. You know?
Yeah, it's amazing. Pictures don't capture you know, I always say it's burned on my retina. I can remember certain views and times and moments and so on. So let's head back to 1983. What got you out there in the first place? Was it something that you heard about and decided you were going to do it on a whim, or you know, what happened? Because a party animal doesn't normally go out and just start hiking the trail unless they've got a background of hiking.
Well, again, I loved hiking. I just couldn't afford to do it as much as I wanted to, and you know, I had a job that the winter before I left where I was basically the night shift on a busy gas station in New Haven, Connecticut, right off the highway, and I was the overnight shift. I was the whole thing, and basically, you know, I got put on a little weight for the first. I was always a skinny kid, like too skinny, and then even when I filled out when I was in my late teens, I just filled out to like normal. And for the first time in my life, I got heavy and out of shape. Because I mean, you'd get home and it'd be like, you'd be exhausted from working all night and you'd sleep through the day, you know, so all the stuff I liked. So it's basically just partying and doing that gas station work and all the stuff I liked. I was always two different people. I always loved getting out and doing stuff during the day. And the more I did, the less I partied. So it really affected my health and that. And I was getting $4 an hour. They gave me a raise to $4 an hour because I was the only person on that whole shift working overnight. And I just said, So
you made the decision to get out there. Yeah. And I know, of course, the gear has changed remarkably since those days. Do you recall some of the stuff you took, and how much did it all weigh when you set out?
My normal weight out of a trail town was over 50 pounds. Yeah. But I mean, how'd you find that? Did you find it overwhelming, or did you just get used to it and you got stronger? It was what you did. Yeah. Back then, everybody. Yeah. I mean, people could cut down a little bit. Some people were very But if you were like really ruthless, maybe you could cut down to like 45 pounds or something going out of town. But I mean, there were long stretches between towns, and it wasn't easy to get, like when you pass through past a road and it was like 15 miles to the nearest town. That was not an easy thing to do with the backpack. You couldn't do that whenever you felt like it.
Yeah, because now people in all these trail towns, they'll pick you up on the side of the road. They pick up these smelly hikers without any problem at all. You know, you can hitch into town quite easily. And you mentioned that you started May the 3rd, and I know that April in those days was a more regular starting date. Why did you want to avoid people?
I didn't want to avoid people. By the time I decided I was going to do that and got my gear together, that was when I could do it, you know.
All right, so okay. And how did you you obviously already had some gear from your hiking days as well. Was there stuff you had to change when you got ready for the hike itself?
I pretty much had all my backpacking stuff. I mean, I really, I had to learn different. Like one of the first things I learned was that nothing prepares you for a long backpacking trip other than a long backpacking trip.
Very true.
When we did those 3 or 4 day backpacking trips, we tried to, we weren't in great shape because you would just be getting in shape and the trip would be over when you do a trip that short. So we tried to carry as little weight as we could. So we skipped on the food, and then you'd finish the hike, and you'd hit the next McDonald's you drove by, which back then, you'd spend it was a big deal to spend $10. You'd spend $10 and eat like a ton of food and make up for it.
Now, We've heard your story through the podcast, so I don't really need to go over too much of the hike itself, but I really want to take you back to two parts of the book.
I just got real quick to finish that, and I knew I wasn't an idiot. I knew that I needed to carry more food for this than I would, but I thought I was, what I'm saying, I carried more food than I would per day than I would for those 3 or 4 day hikes.
Right.
And I thought I was carrying enough, but it wasn't, because I had no idea what kind of calories you could burn through doing those backpacking trips day after day after day. So
how much did you weigh? How much did you lose, George?
Yeah, I lost 50 pounds, and I only in the first I think 10 weeks I lost 50 pounds.
Wow.
I was just reading an entry from 10 weeks in, and I started the trail 30 pounds overweight.
Wow.
So
that's something.
By that, I actually got down to 20 pounds below my normal weight. And then that's when part of that was I just started carrying those really heavy weights out of the town because I was carrying a lot more food. And that was the thing I learned. You could always go through food weight.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah, if you brought a little too much food, you just had to feast that first night. So.
Now, we've heard your story through the podcast, as I mentioned, but so I don't really need to go over too much of that hike. But I really want to take you back to one particular day, and then one other time. One particular day when you wrote what turned out to be the title of the book, Then the Hell Came, which was horrendous. For those who haven't heard this, tell the story of that day, because that was amazing.
Well, yeah, it was one of those real. I was going into it was my last day into Petersburg, Virginia, from the south, and it was just one of those brutal southern Virginia summer days. Some of them, it was one of those days when you'd be walking and you could see the steam around you. The sun would be out, but the sky would look cloudy. There was so much humidity, and it was obvious. The clouds were building up. It was obvious a storm was coming. And I passed this shelter where I knew I had met a couple of the guys that I liked them, and they had stopped, even though they had done a really short day, they stopped because it just looked like it was going to rain. And they didn't want to be on top of Paris Mountain. the mountain you go over the top of right before Petersburg is Paris Mountain, and they didn't want to be on top of that mountain in a big thunderstorm, and I by that time I had gotten over it. Like when I made a mistake, it always seemed to catch up to me. Not like I started hiking that trail in the worst shape of my life. So, like, one thing that'll happen when you're in terrible shape and you're pushing yourself, you get really exhausted at night. So one of my first nights out, I just left my food in my backpack in a shelter in Georgia, and the mice got into it. And being like exhausted and just having to get up and do something, I thought, well, I'll just hang my pack off this nail, and the nail spun around. It took a chunk out of my toe that took weeks to heal. And this was another case where I said, well, I'm going to try it anyway. And if I get a little wet, I'll just get a motel room anyway and take a hot shower. So I thought I could make it. And long story short, the next day they told me that at the peak of that storm, when I was on top of Paris Mountain, 3 inches fell in 1 hour. 3 inches of rain fell in 1 hour in the town. I guarantee you, it was raining so hard up on top of the mountain that I couldn't breathe. It was like the atmosphere was water. So,
but that is a classic. That is a classic sentence. Then the hail came.
Yeah, because
as if to cap everything off that happened then during the day. And the other period of the book that I'd like to revisit is this kind of overwhelming desire to get home to Connecticut. It seemed to border almost on an obsession when you were kind of rushing towards it. Had you missed everybody that much, or was it something you needed to break from the trail? Because it really featured over a number of weeks, that desire to get back to Connecticut.
Well, it was a number of things. One of the things is at 24, it's really hard on a Friday night if you're not out partying with your friends. So I mean I would think that a lot of the people that drop off the trail don't realize how much they're because most people that hike the trail are young, in their teens and 20s, and I don't think a lot of them realize how hard it's going to be to give up all the things you're going to give up for a summer. You have to really love the forest to be able to do that. I think a lot of people just really like the forest and don't realize how. So there was that. And after Dave and I got separated in Hot Springs, I never really hiked with anybody for more than a couple of days after that.
Yeah.
And most times I wasn't hiking with anybody. It's just part of like when I started the trail.
Sure.
And that was that I didn't see a lot. So I was, one of the things, like when I was hiking with Dave, I used to write down stuff like when me and that guy Ron were getting high and telling stories at the shelter one night. And I used to write stuff like that because it happened all the time. But after Dave and I split up, I spent a lot of time alone. So when I was with people, number one, I didn't write it down because it was like, it was such a rare experience. I didn't want to make it work, like work. So I missed a lot of things, and I just wanted to get. It wasn't so much that I missed my mommy or something, but just that I wanted to get to Connecticut and interact with people for a few days. Yeah,
I understand. But then home time was over. And I remember often when you were taken back and forth and that, you didn't get hiking till about midday sometimes. In fact, often but it wasn't even by midday. And I often ask guests about their Katahdin day, but we've only recently heard about yours. Looking back with 40 years of distance since the day you summited Katahdin, does it still give you a thrill?
That I found that a very, it was one of those things. It was one of those moments when you had so many different feelings that they just all canceled out, and you really felt nothing. I was happy to be there, but I was also sad that the trail was over. There were days that especially during the middle of the hike where I couldn't wait to get to Katahdin. But
sure,
I was enjoying the hiking experience a lot in Maine. And yeah, I was looking forward to it being over and moving on to something else, but I was also dreading it being over. So I was one of those people that it just kind of like when I was on top of Katahdin, it just felt like nothing. And the moment that I really felt what a lot of people feel when they would get to the top of Katahdin was after I got back down to the campground and I was waiting for my ride.
Yeah, didn't turn up.
Yeah, and I had been hoping, like I used to have a daydream in Virginia of me standing by that lake.
That's right.
Looking across the lake at Katahdin, yeah, and the sun was setting on it, and it was just heading, the alpenglow hitting the top of the mountain, and I was knowing that the next day I would climb it, and that all the stuff that I went through when I was when I was having those daydreams was worth it. And when I got up that morning, when I got there the night before, it was the day before I climbed Katahdin. It rained and there was low overcast,
sure.
So I didn't see it. Right. I didn't get to see that. I kind of like there was this weird thing in my mind that I was sure I was going to see that, and I was a little disappointed that I didn't get to see that. And then it was cloudy when I woke up, and it wasn't supposed to clear up. So I thought I didn't, it wound up clearing up during my hike, and I had some beautiful, even though it was weirdly steamy for the top of Katahdin on October 3rd. It was like 60 degrees and very humid.
Wow. So, but you did get the alpenglow thing, didn't you? You got it.
Yeah.
When you lived didn't turn up. Yeah. I mean, that was lovely.
Then by the time I got to the bottom, it was cloudy again. Because sun barely managed to burn through for a few hours, and it turned out to be the hours that I was climbing it. And so I got down, it was cloudy again, so I'm writing in my journal, finishing up my journal, and I just happened to look up, and for like 5 or 10 minutes it cleared, and it was like a perfect copy of that vision that I had. And one thing I did before I hiked the trail was I'd never looked at a picture of Katahdin because I wanted to see it for the first time. Yeah. So it was so much like the vision I had, even though I had never seen Katahdin before. When I had that vision, it was kind of, so that was like that moment was like the equivalent when a lot of people have it at the top when they get to the top, the end of the trail.
So you got home, and I know that, and especially reading your epilogue, obviously at the end, which was a bit of a shock, to be honest with you. I know that the partying, particularly the drugs, intensified. How did all this affect your health then, George?
Well, it was weird because, I was still young enough that I was able to shake it off. Sure. The health problems I had were not related to that, like the health problems I had later in life. But I also stopped partying pretty much at all when I was in my early 30s, and I even barely went to the bar anymore after my late 30s. So
And you're feeling well now. Did you keep on hiking when you came back from the trail?
I didn't, but then when I was 38, 39 years old, I got a chance to work for my brother, and I did websites together. We had our own company, and it was in the mid 90s when that was a thing you could make money on.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, because people didn't have like all this. What you see is what you get at website. So
wasn't that called? Is that called WYSIWYG? What you see is what you get. WYSIWYG. Yeah. I
don't know. I don't know how they pronounce it. I've only ever seen it written. So.
Right.
Yeah. But I just I was able to start hiking again because me and my brother could take a few hours during the day and hike, and then work till 11 o'clock at night because we were our own bosses. As long as we got the work done, we didn't care. So that's when I started hiking again, and I've been since my late 30s, I'm 65 now. Since my late 30s, I've been hiking almost every day since.
Nice. So what? Now, you've got this in mind. You still want to do it. You're not sure yet, but you still think you're going to be able to do it. What are you looking for next year on your hike? You're doing it again for this second time. Are you looking to get different things? Because I can tell you in advance, I went twice myself, and my second hike felt entirely different to my first hike. Do you want to meet more people or meet less people? What are you looking to do?
I would like to. It's a little of both. There's a lot of places that I mean, it's amazing, especially when I go to the pictures. It's amazing how many in a few months, how many places you see on an Appalachian Trail hike that you want to see again.
Yeah.
And some of them I have been back to once or twice, and some of them I haven't been back to. And all of those places, even the ones I've been back to once or twice, I want to see again. And the thought of being able to do that all in 1 year is great.
Yeah. How are you going to equip yourself? How are you going to equip yourself, George?
Well, as I told you before, when I did this in 83, I had to do it on a shoestring because I was not a rich man working in that gas station for $4 an hour.
Yeah.
So I basically had to, I would just buy stuff that was a couple of, like, if you bought the tent and the sleeping bag that was hot 2 years ago, it was a lot cheaper, and that's still the way. So I plan to equip myself with stuff that was hot 2 or 3 years ago that's still good, but a lot cheaper than if I couldn't buy I'm sure you could easily spend a few $1,000s on gear now if you bought the best stuff. But if you buy stuff that's like 95% of what the best stuff is, you pay a lot less than 95% of the money.
Of course you do. In fact, I think there's a Facebook site, I can't remember what it's called though, where you can actually get good secondhand gear. It might be a thing to think about as well. I tell you what though, I'd love, George, if you would come on the show next year if you do the hike again. I mean, what a fantastic story it would be for you to come on the show with your hike next year. I'm assuming I'm still doing the show then because I'm now into about my 7th year of doing or 8th year of doing it. So I've been doing it for quite a while. But look, as I wanted to actually, one reason I wanted to have you on the show was to hear your story. But I wanted to thank you, man. I mean, this was such an enjoyable book for me to read that you really took us along with you. I'm with your grandmother. I was hiking along with you when I was reading it out. So I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story, and best of luck next year, okay?
Oh, I appreciate all the kind words, because I'll tell you, it's nice because, I really don't have great ratings on Amazon for my book. And it's nice when people tell me stuff like you tell me, because, I'm like last time I looked, and I don't look that often, I was like a 4.2 on Amazon.
Well, don't worry about all that. That's just
it's so nice when somebody says stuff like you tell me. It keeps me going,
Well, look, don't hang up because I want to talk to you in a minute about something. So, look, I'm going to say goodbye now, and then don't hang up when I say goodbye. As I say, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story, and I can't wait to see what you do next year. So, thanks for coming on, and take it easy, okay?
All right. Thanks.
Cheers, then. Bye.
Bye.
£50 going out of town after a resupply. Funnily enough, I've been looking at several pictures from that era of hiking recently. I don't know why, actually. And it's jarring to see the sheer size of the packs on their backs. It was a bit like Reese Witherspoon in Wild when she had that massive pack on her back. These guys and these gals were really testing their physical limits back then. And I'm not saying that they don't now, but I tell you, I'm really glad I hiked it in the 2010s as opposed to the 1980s. Did you understand what I was getting from George's story? This was a man we only knew as a young, vibrant guy. Yet George is nearly my age and he's heading out again next year. I truly wish him well and hope to be able to follow some of his journey. Before we move on to Katie, I want to thank all you wonderful donors who've kept the train on the tracks this week. Recurring supporters Suzanne Johnson, Betty McEnany, Michael Garsh, Anne Picken, Sharon James, Sean Deadwiley, Kevin Weidman and Manuel Bravo Ramos have all stuck with me, so I'm eternally grateful to them. But I'm not asking for money for the podcast this week. Well, I'll certainly take it if you like what we do. No, this week is the launch of something similar to what I did on my 2014 through hike. Then I didn't have the podcast. In fact, pretty much nobody knew me out on the trail. For many years now, I think it's 11 or 12, I've been serving on the board of Parenting Matters, a child abuse prevention centre in Manatee and Sarasota counties on the Gulf Coast, just south of Tampa in Florida. This organisation has both touched and filled my heart over the years, and back in 2014, I wanted to try and help raise some money for the organisation. We were then called Family Partnership Centre, though the mission was the same, which is to help families understand how to parent their children and to support them as their children grow into productive adults. Back in 2014, at mile 185.3 precisely, I started the Last 2,000 Miles Challenge, which ultimately helped raise nearly $10,000. Fast forward to this year, and I have another hike coming up that I hope will also help our children and their parents. This is particularly poignant for me this year, as it will be the 1-year anniversary of the passing of my son, Rob, in April, and I'm aware how crucial, strong, compassionate parenting can impact a child. I'd like you all to meet Katie Becker now, Executive Director of Parenting Matters. Here's Katie. Today, I'm talking with my friend, Katie Becker. Hey, Katie, thanks for coming on the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, to be clear, this is a bit of a disclaimer for all my hiking friends who listen to this show to listen to our hiking. You're not a hiker. Tell everybody what it is that you do, and especially some of the programs that we offer families.
Well, I have the great pleasure of leading an organization called Parenting Matters. Parenting Matters exists because, simply put, parenting is hard. And you don't always have the right answers. You don't always know who to turn to. And sometimes you can feel quite alone. So I help to lead a nonprofit organization that helps parents feel less alone. And we provide professional parenting educators that connect with families, can go into the home and work directly with parents to address some of the challenges they might be having that could be just day to day or something more serious.
And I know the answer to this, but I'm asking you the question. So, is that an evidence-based system? Because there's something that I know that I was so impressed with when I first got involved with the organisation. Tell us about why you go into the homes of parents and how and what you actually do.
So it is an evidence-based program. It comes from the National Exchange Club. It's one of the only accredited child abuse prevention programs in existence. And what we do is really get ahead of when the really big problems start to happen, and just look at some of those risk factors that families may have when it comes to stress or environment. And the parenting educator will come in and really start building that trust and the rapport with the parents and understand exactly where they are in that journey, and then we'll create a tailored family support plan for them.
Well, as you know, I've been along with one or two of our parenting educators into the families, and I wish I could share some of that with people because, you know, to see it, you can talk about it as much as you wish, but when you see it in action, it is quite something. But one of our programs, which I know we started, I don't know how many years ago it is now, probably about 8 or 9 years, the Chosen Families program. Tell us how that started. And I never knew it was an issue, and it was a shocking issue that how we got involved.
Right, and you're right. It was a tragic beginning, but hopefully a happy ending. So we were contracted by our local county government in Manatee County, Florida, to create a program to support families that were brought together through adoption. Because over the course of 2 years, I think around 2012, 2014, there were 14 children who were returned to state care. So they had been previously adopted in well-established families, were with their families for many years at times. And then when the children got to adolescent age, there were certain behaviors, extreme behaviors that began taking place that the parents simply were not equipped to manage, and became so drastic, and that their situation was so dire that the families simply could not tolerate, and returned the children back to the state care, which is, of course, tragic on many, many different levels.
And the numbers were amazing. Consider it's just that one county. Was it about, you say 14 or 15 in the previous 2 years?
Right.
That's in just one county here in Florida. The nationwide problem of that must be horrendous. So what did we do to address it?
We provide a holistic approach. So first, when we started the program, we really began by listening and understanding better some of the challenges that families were facing who had adopted children. And what we found was that a lot of children who were adopted had experienced some early childhood traumas, and the parents simply were not equipped to manage some of the behaviors were a result of those traumas initially. So we do parenting education. Instead of the 1 hour that's typical in our other program, the parenting educator may be with the family 3-4 hours a week, and really looking at ways to shift the lens of, what's wrong with my child to what happened to my child? How can I support them where they are now? And changing that narrative for the parents so that they have a more deeper understanding of the different ways a brain might work if they've experienced trauma. I give the example, if there was a child who grew up that was very food insecure, always hungry, and then was adopted into a family that wasn't food insecure, that child may go into the pantry in the middle of the night and eat all the snacks that they had purchased for the week.
Sure.
A typical response from a parent may be, Steve, you can't have any of these snacks. These are for the whole week. I'm going to lock the pantry. You can't do this. No more cookies or chips for you. Okay. Well, that is going to elicit that fight, flight, freeze response in a child who has experienced that food insecurity, and there will be a dramatic behavior reaction from it. So a suggestion we might use in that particular situation is, all right, instead of locking the pantry, we're going to have a basket or a bowl out on the kitchen counter that's going to be full 24 hours a day with all your favorite snacks, some healthy, some not. We're never going to let it go more than a third empty. And that's just yours. And you'll have access to that whenever you want to help provide that security and that connection with the family so that you're not feeling like that need is being unmet. And
I know that certainly I don't know the latest figures, so please don't let me down on this one. But I know our figures as a result of that were wildly successful when we started the program. Has it continued to be a success?
Yeah. So we have not in the history of the program had any of the families that have participated have any adoption dissolutions. So every family that participated in the program thus far has remained an intact family. So awesome. I mentioned the parenting education. That's one support we provide. We also provide counseling services in home for both parents, children, and the family. We do respite services so the parents can get a little break and kind of connect with each other and their other children. We do educational advocacy. A lot of the young ones that we work with have special needs, and they might not have the appropriate accommodations in their schools. So the educational advocate can work with the families to help make sure those are put into place. And then all of those services are helped, the families help to coordinate all of that through a care coordinator. So you're not going back and forth with all of these different people telling your story over and over again. The care coordinator helps facilitate that for you.
That's so cool. That is so cool. And I know you have success stories because we hear them as board members all the time, and every month, one of the highlights for all of us on the board is hearing the mission moment. So give us one of the mission moments with us.
One I just was recalling with one of our parenting educators, Ashley. She's in our parent partner program. She was working with a grandfather who had custody of his 3 young grandchildren. One was an infant around 6 months, 3 years, and I think 6 years were the kid's age, all boys. And he was, put into a position where he unexpectedly was caring for them and hadn't raised children for many, many years and didn't really know where to start. So she, first and foremost, came out to the home, met him, connected, and started looking at the direct safety and found that there was some issues with having improper car seats. And the grandpa, he didn't know any better, right? There wasn't information out there that he could find. And he had car seats that were not the right size. They weren't installed correctly. And so she was able to, through the organization and our partners, provide appropriate car seats for the children for their age and weight, and to help him get them installed correctly and safely. And then from that, we start with safety first and foremost. Then she started working with him. And the last thing I heard him say was, I never thought that I'd be sitting around the kitchen table eating dinner with my family. The boys are, sitting together, they're working on their homework together, they're having that connection and that time that he never thought would be possible.
Yeah, and part of our work is generational, isn't it? We bad habits spawn further bad habits, so we want to try to get families working together going forward. And you're here today to introduce, I guess, a bit of a joint venture between you and Parenting Matters and me as a hiker. Tell us briefly about Hike with Steve, empowering parents one step at a time.
So thank you first and foremost for going on this journey to help benefit Parenting Matters. But we are looking to raise money for our programs through this journey that you're taking. So we want to help continue empowering parents through our work. And we're hoping to raise $20 per mile. And every dollar of those donations are going to go back to helping families in our community. We've got a great organization that's willing to match those donations, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But every step of the journey is going to help local families who are working to do better for their children every day.
So to give some further clarity to what the money's used for, can you tell our listeners the impact that their money can have?
So your dollar is providing that parenting educator who is a degreed professional that will go into the home and help families break those generational behaviors that might not be as positive for their kids. We also have an early learning play group so that young ones can get ready for school and be entering kindergarten alongside their peers. And we, of course, have the Chosen Families program that Steve mentioned. But all of the donations would go to support those 3 core programs.
Yeah, so it really is important. And by the way, actually, Katie suggested I do this, and I hadn't really thought about it. But if people donate, more than $2, but if the people donate a certain amount of money, then I'm going to, somewhere on my hike, I don't know how I'm going to do this all the time, but we'll see how it works out. I'm going to go onto the beaches on my coastal path walk and thank you write your name in the sand and take a picture of it, send it back. So we'll see how that works out. But I'm looking forward to that part of it as well. And you mentioned that we've partnered, or we have the Flanzer Trust, who helps double any donations that we get. Is that a straightforward process for donors?
For the most part, we have a really easy link that you can go to that directs you to their website. It's a local trust that works to support children in our community, and they'll match every donation up to $500. So it's $500 per household, $3,000 per household per year. But it's a really tremendous gift that they're giving our community. But on our website, you just click there. I think that we'll also have a link on our homepage with Steve's lovely picture that says Hike with Steve. And if you click there, it goes right to his landing page where you can read more about him and follow him on the journey.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, I'm going to include that link in a number of different places on the website, on our Facebook page, and all the show notes until I actually go on my hike, and actually while I'm on hike as well. So thanks for coming on and telling us about this, which is my constant favourite charity and the only one I'm ever going to be a board member of. So keep up the good work. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We appreciate your help. And I know Steve may have not mentioned it, but he is our board president and is a tremendous volunteer for Parenting Matters and continues to advocate for the work that we do. And I know you've dedicated a lot of your time to help our families and our community. And we appreciate you taking this journey on their behalf as well.
That's nice of you to say, Katie. All right. Okay. Well, we'll speak soon. In fact, no doubt very soon. Take it easy. Okay.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks to Katie for coming on a hiking show to talk about parenting. It's a critical mission and one that I can get behind, so I hope that several of you will as well. And as Katie said, you can get your donations effectively doubled by our association with the Flanzer Trust, so I'm especially excited and grateful for that. There's a link in the show notes that will take you directly to the page for the event and give you the chance to show your support. I will tell you, we've had a really generous donation to kick this off from one of our listeners, and I'm heartened that this is something my friends can get behind. And I will be tracing your name in this ad and taking a picture to post on the Hiking Radio Network Facebook page and probably send it to you via email for our more generous supporters. Thanks for sticking with me over this. I'm excited for the hike, of course, but I'm just as excited by the prospect of what we can do as a community to help families in need. I'll see you next week.